now and talk about identity theft, because this is something that happened to me. I managed to get back to my home after a very long time, and I found all these letters, right? And someone had impersonated me. They'd opened all these store cards. They'd actually rung up debts, like hundreds and hundreds of pounds worth of debts. I found clothes that had been delivered that I didn't order. They'd opened credit cards, all under my name. They got my name right, my address, they'd got my date of birth right. And I actually went and had a look at this in terms of the amount of money being defrauded. So this is the other bizarre thing, right? So this happened to me. I then phoned them all up and said, look, I didn't actually order any of these things. And they said, well, you have to prove it.
Yeah, I know.
And I was like, what? So then I have to phone the police and get a crime reference number. Then I have to go back to them and say, here's the crime reference number. So I had to do all the running. Then I have to arrange the return of all the goods.
Oh, David,
and it was nothing to do with me.
David, I had my handbag stolen and they used my driving licence to go into shops and open phone contracts, and some of the phone companies could not be convinced that I didn't do it. I could phone the people and speak to them who had my phones that I was being billed for. The police weren't interested, the banks weren't interested.
So when I phoned them and I said, right, this is me, and they said, tell me your address, they said, no, this is the wrong address, tell us the address up north. And I went, I don't live up north. And that was the address of the person who'd taken out the account. But they wouldn't then talk to me about the account because it was the wrong address. I was pulling my hair out. And as a result of this, I went to have a look at this. Over £1.2 billion was stolen by criminals through authorised and unauthorised fraud in 2022. That is over £2,300 every single minute. And of course, identity theft and identity fraud occurs a great deal. Well, joining us now is Tony Sells, who's co-founder of We Fight Fraud. Good morning to you.
Morning, David. Morning.
Hopefully you heard my story there. I'm not kidding, I was apoplectic. I spent 2 hours trying to sort it out. Then the delivery company didn't even pick up the goods that I was trying to return.
Did you like them?
No, I didn't like them. But this is common, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that happens all the time, you know. We've still not got a actual crime for identity theft here in the UK. So it's very difficult to disseminate all the information that can be lost, or, you know, like the person in the studio with you just said, you know, she had a handbag stolen. When something like that happens, there's so much information in a handbag that can allow people to steal identities, right? So we've all got to start understanding just a little bit more about how valuable our identities are. Now, I don't know your circumstances, David, but what I do know is that most of us put so much information out there online that someone like me can come along and understand how, you know, the threat landscape looks and gather all of the open source information out there that would allow me to attack you, you know, and steal your identity. So
but you see,
it's a real issue.
Well, it is, and of course I was subject to a data breach through one of the many airlines, actually. You know, when they had that data breach, of course, they nicked all my information. What you said is fascinating. So I reported this to Action Fraud, and then I got a letter back from Action Fraud essentially saying what you have said. The use of another person's identity, referred to as identity theft, is not a police recordable crime. There is nothing I can do.
Yeah, there's not. Yeah, because it's such a. So look, if someone uses your identity, right, and you're the police looking to charge that person, how do you charge someone when they may have used a driving license? So that's using an implement for fraud, right? So that's not an identity theft as such, because that charge doesn't exist, because there's so many different crimes that take place within an identity theft, like fraud. You know, the getting of the mobile phone contract is impersonation and fraud. Yeah, it's creating a contract. So it's like, it gets really complicated, and we still haven't worked it out of how to do it, you know. But reports like that to Action Fraud are what gets stuff done in the future, David. That's what it's all about, you know.
So that's why I did it. I reported it to CFAS as well. Do you want to explain what CFAS is? Do you know?
Yeah, so they're the UK's fraud prevention agency. Yeah, so they're kind of like a really good agency in the background that if you do get caught in one of these identity thefts, you can contact them and they can monitor your credit file for you. and tell you what's happened on it, yeah. And it's the first fraud reporting services. It's an association run by the banks,
and
so it's actually a really good
and you're right. So in terms of my credit score, because they took out a search every single card every time they bought some horrible jumpers and so on, my credit score keeps dropping. So it's now really low.
Yeah, unfortunately, so every time, just like all of us, even if we do multiple credit checks, our credit score is going to drop. What criminals do is when they steal an identity, they do multiple checks in one hit. You know, in a day you could get 6, 10, 15 checks. And now, because of the need for us all to buy stuff so quickly online, you have a lot of companies that offer finance online and you can get instantly approved, right? So it's just literally a tick button online that you have to go through. And I know the government have been looking into regulating that much harder, which will also help the impact of identity theft. So
I was also reading a story this morning which is in the Telegraph. In the past 4 months, shell companies have been sprouting like weeds in the neatly kept homes of Henry Drive. Now, this is basically where one drive has a particular postcode, and basically what's happened is there are lots of companies being set up in people's names who live in that poor road, and they're being set up by places like in China and in Russia. They're getting loans from the banks, and the first that people know about this is when a letter drops through from companies' house saying thank you very much for registering your company, which they didn't do. They then get sent a plethora of documents on the back of it. Is there anything that you can do to stop this?
Yeah, I mean, we have to get better at companies' house at how we open businesses, you know, because it's very easy to open a business with documentation or without documentation in some instances, right? And that is a massive loophole that fraudsters, for however long it's been around for, have been abusing it. And it's great work by Graham Barrow there, exposing that stuff and bringing that out there in that way.
And I've just had a message from Mick saying ID theft is a major crime and police unilaterally decided to decriminalise it. Another massive mistake by police chiefs who are never held to account. Action Fraud is a small office in the city covering the whole country with no staff. Just in terms of that, so there's a difference between having identity theft, which is what happened to me, and then fraud is what you're saying later on.
Yeah, so they're different crimes, you know. Like, someone could impersonate you and steal your identity and never commit a fraud against you, David, but they could be wandering around pretending to be you. Yeah, so that's a fraud, but they've never actually committed a financial fraud. Yeah, so that's where it gets. If you think about all of these things that go into someone committing a fraud in someone's name, there's a whole load of other charges, and it's the charge ramp up that you know, gets the fraudster longer in prison, really. That's why they probably did it in the beginning. I mean, I'm no expert on that, but I assume that's why they would have done it. Now, you know, we do need to get to a place where identity theft needs to become a charge. I don't know how they'll do it, but what I do know is there's a lot of rule changes and a lot more stringent stuff coming from the government and the police on this, because it's such a serious subject that they all want to tackle.
So finally, if I may, what advice would you give to people? I mean, I thought I was pretty careful, but obviously not careful enough.
Yeah, I mean, firstly, so like you said, you got caught in a data breach, right? So there is a really good website called Have I Been Pawned, yeah, PWND, yeah? You can go to that website, put in your email address, and it will tell you if your email has been compromised in a attack, or a ransomware attack normally, or a database breach, yeah? That should be your first port of call. If you have, you can find out what database it was in, go to that company that it was, so you found out it was an airline attack, go to that airline and change your passwords, or delete the app, delete your information from them, whatever it is you want to do, withdraw your information from them. And you just need to be more careful with the information that we have. So always use password managers, yeah?
Oh, really?
Yeah, when you're going online. I mean, like, look, it's like having a wallet, yeah? If you have all your debit or credit cards and your cash all in your pockets when you're going down the road, the likelihood is that you're going to lose some bits. If you've got a wallet, it's all in one place. Yes, if you lose the wallet, you lose everything in one hit, but it's also much easier to go back and know that everything was there. So in a password manager, all your emails are there. If you was to lose access to it, good password managers always have great contact centres and proof of who you are. Yeah, so there's lots of stuff. Always use multi-factor authentication, yeah, whenever you're doing stuff with accounts, yeah. They're really important. Never go to gateways that are not trusted. So if you're using an eBay, a marketplace, somewhere like that, you know, don't get taken outside of the gateways that they provide for you to pay, would be my advice on that. And just keep your data as safe as you can.
It's really good advice. Dr. Renee looked at me like, do you know what he's talking about?
Apparently my email has been pawned in 8 data breaches.
There you go. And do you know about a password manager? Do you know how that works?
I had a password manager, and then I lost the...
But you see, I don't really understand
I
them.
had one, and then I lost the actual password, and then I couldn't find the very long 42-digit code they'd given me in case that ever happened, and I gave up.
I mean, so again, doesn't this go back to the whole problem, Tony? Is that it's becoming so complicated, and I've tried it. I gave up because I didn't like them, but obviously I need to make sure I do use a password manager.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely, but also what you should be doing as well, yeah, it's really simple to just go online, use a search engine, and just search for stuff. What should I do? How do I download a password manager or use a password manager? You know, it will tell you very simply how to do it, yeah? These things are there for us to use, so... Yeah. Brilliant
advice. Thank you so much, Tony. That's Tony Sells, their co-founder of We Fight Fraud. It's extraordinary. But what I was so annoyed about is the amount of time it took me. The fact is that I had
and that they're really not interested.
No one's interested.
Exactly. That's the thing. I could speak to the people who were owning the phones that I was paying for, and the police could have dialed those numbers in a second.
Yeah, but no one wants to, do they? Interesting. Good morning, doctors. Lovely dress, Renee.
Thank you.
Lovely dress. I think we match, actually, this morning. We could easily stop identity theft with digital IDs, couldn't we? Funny how the authorities don't seem bothered to sort it out. Oh, that's not a road I want to go down.
Because people will fake IDs, so we couldn't.
No.